The book was entitled Y'all Fired, a Southern Belle's Guide to Restoring Federalism and Draining the Swamp. My guess is that my guest, and a name that you recognize on SuperTalk Mississippi, Mandy Gunasekara, has been watching with an interested and keen eye as Doge has done its work over the last few months. This is Mornings with Richard Cross on SuperTalk Mississippi. Mandy Gunasekara joins us right now. Good morning, my friend.
Hey, good morning, Richard. Great to be with you.
I understand the struggle in the mornings, especially on school days, and so I especially thank you for joining us in the 7 o'clock hour.
Yeah, well, thank you. As others can attest, I was a little bit late sitting down because I had to put some apples and peanut butter in a lunchbox, but that's all set out the door, and we're ready to go.
all ready to go, and it feels like this time around the Trump administration was ready to go as well. I know you're doing this from afar. You don't have the front row seat that you had when you were chief of staff at the EPA, but as you see and you look and observe the differences in the way the first 8 weeks or so of the administration has gone this time versus last time, how do you describe it?
It's night and day. And it really is a reflection of what a lot of former Trump appointees did that served in the 45th administration, myself included, is, we looked back and realized how much time we lost during those first 100 days. And it was a significant amount of time, and there's a lot of reasons for it. But what we decided is that if given the opportunity to have a conservative administration again, led by President Trump, what policies should we prepare? What personnel resumes should we bring together to offer up to whoever is going to be in charge of presidential personnel and putting people in different positions? Everything from policy strategy to TikToks, that's daily, weekly, monthly implementation plans, as well as the people who could do that. And so for really the past 2.5 years is when this started in earnest. That's what folks have been focusing on. And the thing about President Trump as well, separately from those efforts that were really across Project 2025 got a lot of attention, but there were a lot of different organizations, America First Legal, America First Policy Institute, that were putting a lot of time and investment into making sure not only did we have a strategy from day one, but it was ready to go. And at the same time, you had President Trump, who's never really stopped acting as the executive in chief. Someone said this, who's working for him right now over at the National Security Council, who said, you need to think of this as if it is his 9th year. Of course, he wasn't in the White House for 4 years, but he still was building ideas, paying attention, a part of the national scene, and had a team of folks working around him, either pushing back or laying the groundwork and painting the vision for what would happen on day one of the next opportunity.
Was Stephen Miller kind of the architect? I mean, I know there were a lot of people involved, but was he kind of the point person during that interim in putting this strategy together?
He certainly was on immigration. He's the deputy chief of staff for policy at the White House. The way that actually shakes out from a day-to-day task perspective, you have the chief of staff, and she handles a lot of
Susie Wiles is a boss. I mean, I'm convinced that she is the single most important. I've said this over and over. She's the single most important person in the administration, not named J.D. Vance.
She absolutely is. And what she does is she deals with a lot of, I would say, the inter and intra White House affairs. So this is dealing with cabinet members, just keeping the trains running, making sure the right people are doing the right things. She is so good at that. Very, very well organized. But then the deputy chief of staff, it's a step deeper into getting into the domestic policies, which really is Stephen Miller's bread and butter, immigration. And he had started a nonprofit, America First Legal, and they are one of the organizations that really is the tip of the spear of legal efforts during the 4 years President Trump was out of the White House, holding the line on legality, suing against Biden administration policies that did not have the force of law behind them. But now that President Trump is in, that organization is still in the fold, suing the administration in ways that shore up support, suing against state officers and others that are getting in the way, illegally, mind you, of trying to interfere with the president's agenda. So Stephen Miller is a huge part of the president's success.
You mentioned Project 2025 a second ago. It got so much attention during the campaign, and Democrats were saying this is what they're going to do. They're going to roll out Project 2025. And Trump and others kept saying, no, I wasn't the author of that. That's not the plan. And yet, if you look at what's in Project 2025, a lot of the things that this administration is rolling out are things that were written about and explained in great detail. So what is the role of Project 2025? You had to testify on Capitol Hill as it relates to that particular piece.
Yeah, and it took on a life of its own, mostly because it's a really good piece of work. And what we did is we started playing the game the Democrats had been playing for a long time, is at the end of an administration, keeping teams together to figure out what should you carry forward and present as the next opportunity. Now, I testified before Congress, and Trump said this time and time again, which is absolutely true. He had nothing to do with it. But of course, there's some parallels between what Project 2025 included in their mandate for leadership, which was the policy handbook, and what the president's doing. And that's because the president is aligned with where the majority of the conservative base is when it comes to approaching policies, from economic policy to deregulatory actions, balancing energy production alongside environmental protection, securing communities with a safer border, just about everything. There's a big discrepancy on the trade front between where some of your traditional conservatives are, but not, and where the president has ultimately gone. But the policy handbook, it was a suggestion of this is where the conservative movement is on these policies. This is how you could achieve it. And Mr. President, it's in your prerogative to pick and choose what policies that you actually implement. You can take it and run with it. From there, we're here to help. And that's why you've seen some of the policies that the president has tapped into that are parallel to what Project 2025 and other conservative organizations put out there. They've been so successful because it wasn't just one person or one group thinking about it. It really was the collective effort of the technical experts that we use to help shore up these ideas, the legal experts to think about what are the laws that support us, what's going to be challenged, how do we prepare for that. I mean, every single angle, you're trying to make sure they're going to try, the other side or those who disagree are going to slow you down. And Project 2025 really was a reflection of that. And again, it's very similar with what the president was saying on the campaign trail, policies he pursued in the 45th administration, and what he is doing now. So again, I characterize it more as parallel actions, but it's because so many of us, not just the conservative movement, it's now expanded beyond with people like RFK Jr., Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, those types of folks. A lot of us are on the same page of seeing how wrong this country was going because of bad policies from the top and how we go about fixing it.
Mandy Gunasekara is my guest. This is Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk Mississippi. You can jump in if you want to on the C Spire text line at 601-879-4395. The tariff piece that President Trump is implementing. Interesting story in the Wall Street Journal saying that they may be a little more systematic than we originally thought when that April 2nd deadline rolls around. And it's not necessarily going to be tariffs, reciprocal tariffs across the board for everybody, focusing specifically on some industrial areas that they may be a little more strategic in the way they implement those. There's a lot of concern from different segments of industry. I know farmers are concerned because so much of what we grow in the United States is exported to other parts of the world. I know the shipping industry is very, very concerned about tariffs and how you could even have charges that happen multiple times as it goes to different ports. When you look at this, what is your concern on the tariff piece of this conversation?
I wouldn't say that I have a concern. I would say that I see it for what it is, where you've got to play the long game, and you have to look at where we are. Let's take dairy farmers, for example. I interacted with them most recently, and they're going to be impacted by tariffs between mostly Canada and the United States. But for far too long, they've been on the receiving end of 125% tariff for selling their product into Canada. So the president coming in and pushing back, he's attempting to level the playing field. And yes, that does create some uncertainty in the short term, but in the long run, they see the benefit because they have been on the receiving end of the United States not acting in the way that we should, given our economic standing and our economic power. And you got to look at the relationship, the economic relationship between U.S. and Canada. They are much more dependent on the United States. So the President Trump is reshifting the balance in a way that will likely cause some cost or instability in the short term. But in the long term, it's going to put the United States economy in the position that is reflective of how other countries are so dependent on what we do and what we bring to the economic table.
But how long can you hold on to that pain? You got time to hang with us for one more segment?
Yeah, I do.
Mandy Gunasekara, former chief of staff at the EPA. She's an author as well. Her book is titled Y'all Fired. We got more coming up with Mandy after this time out. Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk Mississippi. .com. Mandy Gunasekara is my guest this morning as we roll through the 7 o'clock hour. Hope your day is off to a great start. Mandy, let's switch gears for a second and talk about Greenland. I said to Lance earlier this morning, I don't remember the wife of a vice president, so the second first lady, being part of a diplomatic envoy to a foreign country. But that's what we've got happening this week when Usha Vance is going to join Michael Waltz, the National Security Director, in a trip to Greenland. This is something that feels like started off as a campaign or between the election and inauguration conversation. It was kind of funny and it was kind of cute, and it was happening at the same time people were talking about Canada as the 51st state. But the Greenland conversation has become very real. And we got a message from Shaq Bully this morning on the C Spire text line saying, hold on a second. Why do we think we can just go take over a country? Just because we got 300 million people, does that give us the right to take over a sovereign nation by force? I don't think that is actually the plan. But when you look at this conversation as it surrounds Greenland and the security interests and the natural resources that are available there, what do you make of it?
Yeah, I think Greenland has always been a strong strategic partner. We've had military installations there for a long time. Actually, when I was born, my father was stationed at Thule Air Force Base for 2 years, so 84 and 85, over in Greenland. Now, the presence of the military installations predates that, but nonetheless, for the entirety of my lifetime, there has been a strategic relationship with Greenland. And, you know, while the president mentioned it, and I think a lot of people looked at it as unbelievable, he meant it seriously because he talks to the folks who realize the national security implications, the minerals that are there, and the strong strategic partnership that we have enjoyed for so long. Now, to the C Spire text line concerns, we wouldn't go in and take it by force. That's not what we're going to do. There is an opportunity to either strengthen that relationship as it currently is, or there is a movement on Greenland right now to have a vote, essentially a referendum, whether or not they want to stay with Denmark or they want to join in a more formal way with the United States. And a lot of that has to do with you look at what has Denmark actually done? What is their original stake? When you get into this, there is a very, very strong case for the United States to have a stronger relationship with Greenland, whether that is some formal making them an additional territory or just strengthening what it currently is. But there's a very strong case for that. And the more important aspect is there are people there, citizens of Greenland that have been there for quite some time that are increasingly interested in this. So it's an opportunity for them. The president, he mentioned it. I think, again, a lot of people treated it as something in jest. but strategically, it's something that folks from the national security side have been thinking, and at least in the back of their mind, for quite some time for a variety of reasons. And also, as you know, we shift our focus towards space engagement, having a presence in a place like Greenland, it makes a lot of sense for those overarching national goals as well.
It's going to be interesting to see where this goes. You mentioned that election coming up. I think it's later this week. About 58,000 residents of Greenland, and going to be fascinating to see how that plays out. I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation that your observations of Doge. I'm assuming you've been smiling as Elon Musk and the Doge team have been going about their work. Some of that is what you wrote about in your book, You All Fired, where you're talking about downsizing the government and finding waste. To me, there are two things that really stand out in this. One is the uproar over how it's being done, not what is actually being found. People don't seem nearly as concerned about the waste that's being found as the fact that you've got this Elon Musk-led group that is doing the finding. And then the second piece of it, and this is, I think, far more concerning, is the role that the judiciary is playing in this with district court judges who are appointed, most of them Democrat appointments from presidents gone by, that the role that they are playing and the way they're hampering the administration as it's trying to do its job.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point that people are focusing on the wrong thing. The extent of waste is unbelievable. It goes far beyond what I thought would be there. And I had a pretty good insight into what that might look like. But, you know, you have to look and see really what has Doge done. All they've really done up until this point, beyond policy recommendations that have been taken to downsize certain areas or to reintegrate certain offices and buildings into other departments for efficiency's sake, they've done an audit. And as long as anyone in Washington, D.C. has been talking about we need to figure out the budget, they spend way too much money and there's a lot of waste, but we're not quite sure where. There was always this question of who was going to be sitting in a position and have the capabilities to perform a comprehensive audit necessary to understand where the problem truly lies and then how to go about fixing it, whether it's by reshuffling or just getting rid of it altogether. And so I've been ecstatic to see what the Department of Government Efficiency has done, because my experience, I went in as chief of staff, but even in my initial role in a more technical position in the Office of Air and Radiation, one of the first things I had to do was to go through our budget and try to find line item amendments that were consistent with refocusing the mission. We had the back to basics mission, but it's similar today, cleaning up air, water, land, increasing efficiency, and addressing legacy pollution. And going through the budget, it was overwhelming. It's purposefully convoluted and difficult to know where money A goes and why it ends up in pocket B, C, D, and then maybe subpart E, F. It's impossible to find. So what they're doing, it's a huge service. The amount of waste is ridiculous. People should be up in arms. This is your money. This is all of our money. It's not government money. Government money is taxpayer dollars. And so to the extent there's waste, fraud, and abuse going to pet projects that don't assist and potentially undermine the mission of agencies that are put in place to assist we, the people, that should be infuriating. And yeah, some people are going to lose their job, but those people, they've had a fake job for numerous years. They get 165 plus salary with massive benefits, and many of them have hardly gone into the office for over 4 years. And now that the president is saying, if you still want this sweet job with all these awesome benefits and you really care about contributing to the public service of this country, just come into the office and do your job. They're the ones who are out there throwing up at their hands and saying, oh, we can't do that. And mind you, that's not the way the private sector works. That's not the way that I've ever worked. I've always been at will employment. And so the concern really is the fact that this protected class of entitled workers is now being brought into the fray of at-will employment that the rest of us have had to deal with while they've reaped the benefits of being in a protected position funded by our dollars. So it's a beautiful thing to see.
All right, let me ask you this as we wrap up. When you go back to the confirmation of Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense, the most critical vote was the vote of Joni Ernst, the senator from Iowa, and ultimately she said that the reason that she voted for Pete Hegseth was because of his commitment to do a full audit of the Pentagon and make sure that we can account for the dollars. They haven't ever passed an audit in the history of the entity. Has that audit begun at the Pentagon? Do you know if that is happening yet? And how long until we see some results there? And I'm afraid they're going to be not something that we're really fired up about reading.
Yeah, no, and I think the Department of Defense they've largely gotten a free pass because we all support the men and women in uniform and the protecting of our country both here and abroad. But because they've gotten a free pass, that waste, fraud, and abuse it's proliferated on a massive scale. I do know that those audits have begun. I'm not sure how extensively or what the scope is, if it's specific to certain offices. But you have to think about this. And Secretary Hegseth has been clear. They're not going to go after the readiness of our soldiers or the lethality of the Department of Defense, which is the actual mission. What they're going to be going after is a lot of these superfluous offices, things that we saw on full display during the Biden administration, where they had actually spent millions of dollars having people tell our men and women in uniform how to appropriately use pronouns for the LGBTQ plus community. That has nothing to do with the defense of this country and the lethality of this country, or the lethality of our forces. It has everything to do with pushing this skewed cultural agenda onto our soldiers by virtue of the fact that they are federal employees, which is an abuse of leadership and a complete mismanagement. So going after those sorts of things and the relative costs, there are some disruptive companies. Anduril Industries is one of them, for example, but have shown that you can bring in new technologies without the massive cost.